So the content that I'm doing here, I'm actually going to give at a conference next week. So I kind of wanted to just run through it with you guys and let you guys kind of see what I'm working on in regards to licensing. Right now, what we've been looking at within my organization is an adoption of Office 365, not unlike what a lot of people have been looking at, and then also looking at the best way for us to procure not only Office but also Windows and server-side licensing. So kind of gone through here and looked at the best way for us to get access to all those different tools and walking through what the licensing models are going to look like. So are we all good so far?
We're all good.
Awesome. All right. Going through and we start talking about licensing with any of the client-based licensing components in Microsoft world, we're really talking about Windows and Office. What Microsoft is doing is they're breaking these up into multiple procurement methods for how individuals or businesses are going to gain access to these tools. Most of these are things that people in IT have been around and have seen for years. Obviously, with OEM, the OEM licensing is going to allow a company or a user, individual home user, to be able to access not only Office but also Windows, and they buy it as part of the device. So that's just packaged. Within the OEM licensing, Microsoft is going to state that that license belongs to the device itself, and that's actually not something that's transferable. It's not clonable. It really doesn't fit into an enterprise model. It's really there for OEM use as part of the device. Microsoft is now releasing different methods for procuring this outside of that model. Within retail, it's actually going to allow users to go out and procure licenses, and depending on the product, it may allow them to use it on up to 5 devices. This is going to be something we see with the Office 365 model for consumers, where a consumer can actually go out, they can procure for $99 a year Office 365 licensing and then install that on multiple devices and share it with multiple people. In the enterprise realm, really, there's 2 models that Microsoft promotes. The volume licensing model, which really kind of follows the traditional Microsoft licensing, procuring the actual license itself through some volume licensing channel, fitting in one of the models, whether it's open or select or open value. At that point, the organization owns the license, and that license can be purchased either as a perpetual license, meaning that I own it and I can't change, or through software assurance, where through the software assurance, I'm actually going to purchase that license, spread that cost over multiple years, and then have the ability to move forward with whatever version of that particular product offering is current. So that's kind of the upgrade as we go, or you choose the version that you want to run as you move forward. Those top 4 have been around for a long time. The as a service is really where Microsoft is going with a lot of their different products. Specifically, we're talking about more of the node, the actual user device. With the as a service, we're paying on a monthly recurring, and we get access to that particular component. Again, Office 365 introduced this a couple years ago, but Microsoft is extending this into their entire portfolio as far as how people are going to consume different product. Within the Windows 10 realm, Microsoft has a couple different flavors. The Windows 10 Home obviously is going to be the consumer device. Windows 10 Pro, the ability to join a domain, can be licensed and network joined and managed by a network organization. And then enterprise/education, really those 2 being essentially the same operating system, really being the enterprise grade operating system that can be managed. It also introduces tools like App Locker, or the ability to be controlled by App Locker, direct access, branch cache. Microsoft is considering that and always has an upgrade license that you procure through some volume licensing channel or subscription. And that's one of the things that is kind of interesting. I'm going to pull up a VM here. This is signed into an Office 365 portal, and many of you have probably been in your portal before. I'm just going to go under my other plans here and kind of look at some of these a la carte offerings. I go clear down to the bottom. One of the things that Microsoft has started to introduce is the ability to gain access to Windows and use Windows 10 Enterprise as a monthly subscription, as an add-on to whatever you're doing with your Office 365 or your Azure AD subscription. And they pair that up with EMS, if I choose to, or it can actually be bundled all together in an offering that Microsoft calls Microsoft 365, where it's bundling the Windows 10 Enterprise, the EMS for the security platform, and then Office 365 for mail and collaboration, as well as the Office products on the client machines. So we're really starting to see a shift in how Microsoft is going to be making operating systems and applications available, moving from that one-time purchase and the traditional volume licensing into more of an as-a-service, pay-as-you-go type of a model.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Let me add into that. In addition to that, your volume license or SA deal, whether it's a 2 or 3 year deal, provides you the ability to determine whether you want it on-prem or in the cloud. So if you purchase, say, Windows Server, or if you purchase Microsoft Dynamics or any of the Dynamics suite, you have the option to either use cloud or on-prem when you get your SA. In addition, each one of your OSs, for example, give you the ability to run Windows Server as an Azure VM or as standby mode, as long as one of the instances of not SQL, but one of the instances of server isn't operational. So if it's in a turned off mode, or if it's being synchronized, you're licensed in both places for live backup.
Cool.
Unless it recently changed, which who knows, it changes every week.
It's been an exercise of frustration to try to stay on top of this as we're going through and procuring it on our end.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you offline about that. So at some point in time before you actually procure or as you're moving forward, I want to chat.
Sure. One of the things that Microsoft is doing with their Windows desktop operating system is they're working through versions and have really started to kind of change the platform in which people look at their client-based operating systems. If I go back to that example within Office 365, this Windows 10 Enterprise E3 license is meant to be a provisioned instance of Windows 10 Enterprise that is actually spurred upon the logon of the user to the device. And in the scenario, if I were to procure Windows 10 Enterprise at the $7 a month through the E3 offering as a subscription, my underlying prereq is that I have Windows 10 Professional. I sign on to the Azure AD, and upon signing into Azure AD, the Windows 10 Enterprise code is provisioned, or it's actually turned on within the operating system, and my Windows 10 Pro machine becomes an enterprise device upon logon. So a little bit different model from what a traditional IT model would look like in regards to how I'd be putting out, a Windows 10 deployment using Windows 10 Enterprise as an example. Windows 10 was one of the first operating systems that Microsoft released where they really started to embrace the concept of the builds and the versions. And when we look at the operating systems from a technical aspect, the build and the version IDs really become the important part of how I keep track of the operating systems that I'm working on. Affectionately, Windows 10 is just Windows at this point. Microsoft doesn't, at least on their roadmap, have a plan for that to waver going forward. So what we would see is we'd see the version numbers are identified by the release year and month. So as an example, Windows version 1703 would indicate that it was released in March of 2017. That build number is going to be the reference of the actual build of the code as the developers are putting that operating system together. Prior to 1709, you had current branch for business, and LTSB being different subsets of the operating system. Current branch and current branch for business were the standard download and load for Windows 10. Current branch was going to be the iteration of the operating system that was kind of an early adopter of feature releases for that particular Windows operating system. Current branch for business was a delayed, where there would be a delayed 4-month wait time after a new feature was released before it was actually implemented within your production environment. Long-term service branch, the intent of long-term service branch is the operating system would not get feature changes for 60 months. So the idea would be if I had a specialized build for my operating systems, I could use an LTSB load and that LTSB load would not be subject to any change. So, with the example down here at the bottom, looking at a load, I may go through here and say that I'm running Windows 10 build 1703 or version 1703 build 15063 and it's CB. From a technical aspect, that would actually tell me when this operating system was released, what build it was on, and then how frequently it's going to be getting feature releases as automated updates to the operating system. With 1709, which was the most current production release that's out there right now, although we're going to see 1803 here shortly, this was really where Microsoft kind of ramped up the Windows as a service. The release of 1709 combined the Windows client operating system and the server-side operating system, and started now some new terminology with 1709 and going forward, where now Windows on the client side, or Windows 10 and Windows Server, would now fall into two categories instead of three. Long-term service channel is going to be the release of the operating system that does not have feature change, versus semi-annual channel, which would then be an operating system that I would roll out with the intent that every 6 months there's a new version, and that operating system is supported for 18 months. So at this point now, again, terminology has changed just a little bit with long-term service channel and semi-annual. And it's actually done some interesting things when we start to look at operating systems. Let me back up here. I'm going to open up my AD. What I've got here is a couple Active Directory domain controllers. And when I go into the properties of these Active Directory domain controllers, I'll see that I can actually view what operating system that they're running. So I can actually see where I'm at with this Windows Server 2012 R2 standard. And if I jump out of that, we can look at a second DC. This will actually read again what operating system I'm running. Notice that when we look at the operating systems, that year designator, which we're all familiar with, is going to be there. But then I'm also going to see what build that particular operating system was on. So this is telling me that I was on 14393 for this OS. When you look at Windows Server 1709, what Microsoft has done is they've decided to take the year designators out of the identifier for the actual server operating system. So literally at this point, it's just Windows Server. And going forward, this particular operating system running that build 16299 is going to just continually evolve as it rolls forward. And it would no longer have a year designator. And I'm anticipating our client operating systems are going to follow suit with one of the next releases when we see these new builds come out. From a support aspect, we're going to see that the support for the operating systems is really going to start to vary depending on when that operating system was released and what build we're on. This matrix I just pulled off of Microsoft's website. It's been a couple months ago now. But if I zoom in here just a little bit, what we're going to start to see are the availability dates and then end of support. So as these operating systems start to progress, we can see down here at the bottom all the different versions of Windows 10, starting in 2015, working its way forward to 1709, and when we're going to start to see them roll off the roadmap from a mainstream support aspect. If we look at the roadmap, as far as how Microsoft is planning on rolling these out, what we'll see, let me back up here one, these 6-month releases, if I'm on semi-annual channel, meaning that I'm installing the version of the Windows 10 operating system that's just going to simply be rolling forward, and we're going to see a fall and a spring release of the operating system that'll be very predictable. So a September and a March release is what Microsoft is going to start to release out from an operating system aspect. Each one of those will have an 18-month support cycle. So if I want to stay current, let's say that I'm running 1709 today, for me to stay within support, I'm just going to have to continue to roll my operating systems forward on or before the end of the 18-month period, at which point mainstream support will end for that operating system. A couple different ways that I can go out and see my version information from a client. There's a PowerShell command that I can run. There's also the GUI equivalent where I can actually just run winver.exe, and this will pop up and tell me, again, which build and which version I'm running for my operating system on my clients. Office. With Office, we're now going to see Office follow a similar model. What Microsoft has done is they've released 2 different iterations of Office. They have lots of different names, but typically we're going to refer to it as MSI versus Click to Run. When you talk MSI, MSI is going to be the traditional installed iteration of Office on a computer. So that would be, I pop in the media or load the ISO, double click on the setup, it installs. This is where I'll see the traditional Office designator with some sort of a year to tell me which version of Office I'm running. So Microsoft Office Pro Plus here on the left, that's going to iterate or indicate that I've got a version of Office that was installed via MSI. Over here on the right, I'm going to see what's called a Click to Run. Click to Run is going to be a little bit different. With Click to Run, we will see it branded as Office 365 in contrast to a year designator. And by design, it's going to follow a model similar to the SemiAnnual Channel in which I will have versions and builds, and a Click to Run version of Office simply rolls forward as new changes occur. Microsoft's goal with the Click to Run version of Office is for Office 365 subscribers to have an installed version of Office that looks very similar to the web equivalent of the Office that they're used to when they open up the web version of their Office 365 product suite. So as a general rule of thumb, when I see changes or adjustments to the ribbon in Word, as an example, in Web Word, if I'm running a Click to Run version, that tool, whatever that tool would be, should be able to be followed all the way down to the desktop instance of Office when I run it on my computer. As far as getting the software for these, MSI is going to be something that I would download from a volume license site. So this is where I'd go out to my volume licensing provider, download the ISO, install Office, and it's going to be a particular version. Click to Run actually will be built into some of the Microsoft operating systems, depending on how they're procured. So as an example, on this particular machine here, I'm going to see this Get Office, which will be built into my Windows 10 builds. And when I choose Get Office, this will actually launch a wizard within my Windows environment that allows me to go out and pull down my programs from my Office 365 subscription and run them from my device. Again, a little bit different model in that in the Click to Run world, Office essentially streams updates down to the clients and will keep the client devices current with whatever the web equivalent of that particular product would be. So some of the differences here, Office, if I were to procure Office 2016, Pro or Standard, it's going to be a volume license purchase. It's a traditional MSI. Activation is going to occur through Mac, KMS, or Active Directory. So really, in that top version, I'm following kind of the traditional activation mechanisms for Office. If I use Office 365, it's going to be an as a service. It'll use Click to Run, where it'll actually stream it down from the website, or it'll be pre-built into my operating system. And activation is actually going to be done by the logon of the user. So when my tenant user logs into the product, that's the point in which activation of that particular Office product occurs, and that is going to license the use of that product on the device. The roadmap for Office is going to follow the Windows builds very closely. The intent here is that if I'm going to be doing a deployment, I've got a predictable rollout of my Windows desktop operating systems with my Office rollout. So if I'm using Office 365, if that's all where all my tenants gain access to the Office Productivity Suite, I can use a staged rollout method to actually release these things through my tenant so that the builds and versions of my Windows environment and my Office environment butt up together and roll forward. Again, that 18-month life cycle, every 6 months, the new product offering getting released and being streamed down to the users. Just a couple tech notes on the side. Every time there's a new release of Windows, there should be a corresponding release of the 80K. So if you're using the ADK to do any deployment management or enterprise management, that ADK rolls forward with each release of Windows as those Windows releases come out. Just kind of a review on the server side. Again, starting with Windows Server 1709, the long-term service channel is a different load. So when you go out to the volume licensing website, you will see Windows Server 2016 long-term service channel, or LTSC, versus a Windows Server download for SemiAnnual Channel. Those are two different operating systems. Some of the big differences between these operating systems is going to be the integration from a server-side aspect of what's included with these OSs. With 1709 Server, Nano and Core are going to be the only two versions of the operating system that are available when you go SemiAnnual Channel. So I'm not going to have any GUI. There'll be no desktop experience when I'm running SemiAnnual Channel of Windows Server. It's going to be all PowerShell or command line at the interface if I want to get on the console itself. If I want to run the long-term service channel, Nano has been removed from long-term service channel. So my accessibility of Nano Server to provision Nano servers in my environment are only available when I'm using SemiAnnual Channel. And again, these changes are effective as of the 1709 release of Windows Server. Any questions? That's all my slides.
I don't even know where to start. Well, I mean, we've known that Windows as a service is the way it's going to go. But I think my bigger question, well, I don't know that I have a question. On that click to run that you showed for Office, is that the Office 365 version? Is that the click to run?
Yep. Yeah. So the click to run for Office 365, obviously I can just pull it from my client portal where I can sign in and hit install Office. If I'm going to be rolling this, what we're going to do with our next build, we are going to embed click to run in our image, and then through MDT, we'll customize that image and roll it out. There is a script that you can use to tell it to actually automate the authentication of the click to run to your Office 365 tenant, and we'll be rolling that with our next revision of our image that we start rolling out on our desktops. And so there's a different way from an admin aspect to get it, that you can download it. But otherwise, the click to run, is just what your users go to their portal and they click the button that says install Office, and it comes down on the machine. What makes it a little different, though, is that get Office is something that is going to be built into the Windows OS. What I'm showing you on this VM, this is a clean, remember right, that I actually downloaded off the volume licensing site, installed it, and that get Office was embedded in it. This is Windows 10 Enterprise off of the volume licensing site.
Gotcha.
So click on this, and that's actually what I did right before I started. Is I opened this up, I signed in with my Office 365 user and told it get Office. For my programs, there was the option to install, like you'll see here for Sway, and it starts downloading Office. It streams it right down to the device.
Yeah, there's some incompatibilities that need to be brought up so that you're aware when you're dealing with the click to run. So if you start to mix between online Office 365 applications and on-premise applications, you will run into incompatibility between the products. So as an example, if you download Microsoft Project and you have Microsoft Office 2016, they will not work. You can't deploy them in the same box. There are significant workarounds. There's an additional tool that you need to download, change registry settings, and fake out the click to run, click once, or click to run once, whatever you want to call the app, in order for that incompatibility to be addressed. And it's one of the things that hopefully that they'll fix going forward. But as an example, if you download Project separately and try to deploy it, you're going to run into a can't install, even if it's all 64-bit. The bit structure doesn't matter. It's the MSI versus the click run once stuff. That and another add-on, John, I think that's really important that you might want to bring to light for your chat going forward is there's a significant difference today, and as I'm being very careful in the words here. There's products, and there's very product support, which is what you were talking about, being that Microsoft supports the software development feature fixes and patches for a product. That is not technical support. And so when Microsoft is talking about their product support and the life cycle, what they have been doing over the last couple of years is directly segmenting technical support and removing technical support from Microsoft's liability line and pushing it out onto the partner and distribution channel that actually sells the software. So there are two channels, that in which you procure your software. Depending on the channel you procure your software, you may or may not get technical support. And so the expectation is that technical support will be managed by the partner organization or distribution process. And that's a very, very different model that you'll be seeing progressively throughout the Windows ecosystem as the years go on.
I would add too, because I've had the same problem where I have Office 365 on my desktop, and I went out and got Visio because I needed Visio separately, and they wouldn't run on the same desktop, and that was a while ago. So that incompatibility has been around for a while, it seems. And I noticed recently with the latest update with Office 365, it doesn't say Word 2016 anymore. It just says now on the banner when it pops up, it says Word, and then it says Office 365. So you can already see the changes coming. Anyone have any other questions?
Just a lot to soak in.
Well, just one thing that I just noticed just recently, because I did a class on OneNote, and there's two versions of it, right? There's what I think is the click to run, the one that comes up with the Windows 10 on the desktop already there and installed, and it looks just like the online version of OneNote. And Microsoft calls that the universal experience, because if you're on an Apple Mac or you're on any other platform, it's going to be the same. And the OneNote 2016, which that's the only Office application that I have after the last update that still says 2016 on it. It says OneNote 2016, but I think that's also going away. But right now, Microsoft said they're supporting both at this point in time. Last thing I saw on their website earlier this week, and you can run them side by side. But it sounds like they're probably going towards that same model, that universal experience, where if you're online or on the desktop, it looks and feels the same. Which is what.
Yeah, and we've seen the same thing with our, the users getting confused as far as which version of OneNote or which OneNote to use. Because if it's the first time they've used it, they get prompts and it's asking them which one, and it'll say, do you want to use OneNote or OneNote? Frustrated, because I think it's very confusing.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Trainers Underground. If you have any requests for future episodes, please go to our website, www.learnsecurity.org, and fill out the comment section. If you found this video informative, please like below. We would greatly appreciate that. If you would like to catch a future episode, just follow this channel or find it on our website, www.learnsecurity.org. If you have any comments about today's episode, please comment below. Again, thank you so much. And remember, stay safe and secure.